A local man heard strange sounds coming from the woods. He called the police, and what they found surprised everyone. John rushed into the Waverly police station. "Officer, something strange is happening in the woods behind my neighbor's house," he said anxiously. "I've been hearing noises at night, like dogs crying. I think something illegal is going on." Sheriff Chris Davis looked up, immediately realizing the seriousness of the situation. He grabbed his hat and called his team. They followed John to the woods, where the sound of barking grew louder, confirming John's fears. John, a lifelong resident of Waverly, had always paid attention to his surroundings, which is why the unusual noises bothered him so much. Unable to ignore the cries, he decided to take action. Sheriff Chris Davis, tall and stern but fair, had served Humphreys County for over 20 years. Known for his commitment to justice, he also had a soft spot for animals, having adopted several strays. When John reported the strange noises, Chris knew he had to act fast. He brought along his trusted deputies, Amy Brooks and Mark Sanchez, who shared his dedication to protecting the helpless. Chris radioed for backup from the Animal Rescue Corps, RC. As they followed John into the woods, he knew this would be more than just a routine check. RC had a reputation for handling severe cases of animal abuse and neglect, and their expertise would be crucial. Scotland Hasley, the president of RC, answered the call. He had dedicated his life to saving animals from horrific conditions. His team, including veterinary technician Lisa Harris and animal handler Jake Thompson, was always ready for action. The group reached the edge of the property John had described. The sight that greeted them was absolutely shocking and heartbreaking. Dogs were chained to stakes, their ribs visible through their fur, their eyes wide with fear and desperation. Makeshift shelters and chemical barrels littered the area, and the smell of decay hung heavy in the air. John's stomach churned at the sight, but he felt a grim sense of vindication. He had been right to trust his instincts. Sheriff Davis and his deputies quickly assessed the situation. "We need to get these animals out and find who's responsible," Chris said. Amy and Mark agreed. Soon after, Scotland and his team arrived with supplies and medical equipment. "This is worse than I thought," Scotland remarked as Lisa tended to the injured dogs and Jake set up kennels. The rescue team worked quickly, confirming this was an organized dogfighting ring. Evidence, including treadmills and suspicious barrels, pointed to a larger operation. As they loaded the last dog into the van, Chris realized they had what they needed to build a strong case. "This is one of the worst operations I've ever seen," Chris said to Scotland. "But we have what we need to bring these people to justice." As the initial investigation continued, the team began to piece together a broader picture of the operation. Signs pointed to a larger network involved in breeding and fighting dogs, with multiple locations possibly in play. The realization that this was just one piece of a bigger puzzle added urgency to their mission. Lisa and Jake worked on compiling detailed medical records for each animal. These reports would be crucial in building the case against the perpetrators. "Every scar, every wound tells a story," Lisa said. "We need to make sure their stories are heard." The chemical barrels found on the property were sent for analysis, and the results were alarming. They contained substances commonly used in illegal breeding and training practices. This discovery further solidified the severity of the operation. The extent of the cruelty sparked a relentless drive to uncover the truth and bring justice to the animals. As the investigation progressed, challenges grew. Sheriff Chris Davis and his team faced resistance from the local community. Rumors spread, and one morning, they were confronted by a group of residents led by Hank, a burly man. "What do you think you're doing?" Hank demanded, accusing them of stirring trouble without proof. Chris explained they had evidence of illegal dogfighting, but Hank remained defiant, insisting they leave. Amy tried to calm the situation, saying they were there to help the animals. Despite the tension, Chris remained determined. "We're not backing down," he told Amy. "We owe it to the animals." Back at the station, Deputy Mark Sanchez reported new developments. "We got reports of animals being moved to a location outside of town. It looks like they're trying to stay one step ahead of us." Chris's frustration grew. The perpetrators were becoming more elusive, and the local resistance wasn't helping. They needed to move quickly. If the animals were being relocated, it meant the criminals were trying to cover their tracks. The team mobilized swiftly. Leads took them to a remote farm on the outskirts of Waverly. The farm appeared abandoned, but signs of recent activity were clear. Chris, Amy, and Mark approached cautiously. As they searched the property, they found more makeshift shelters and equipment indicative of dogfighting. The evidence was there, but the animals were not. Amy examined the ground and noticed fresh tire tracks leading away from the farm. They can't be far. Let's follow the tracks and see where they lead. The trail wound through dense woods and rough terrain. After hours of tracking, they reached another secluded location, a dilapidated barn hidden among the trees. Inside, they found several dogs in deplorable conditions, all chained and malnourished. Lisa Harris and Jake Thompson from ARC arrived with medical supplies and transport crates. Chris addressed his team. "We're making progress, but we can't let up. We're getting closer to the heart of this operation. Stay focused and stay safe." 2 days later, as Chris Davis reviewed the investigation details in his office, he received an unexpected visitor. It was a woman named Clara Jenkins, in her early 60s, with weathered skin and kind eyes. Clara took a seat and twisted her hands nervously. "I've heard about the troubles you've been having with the investigation," she said. "I think I might be able to help." Chris's curiosity was piqued. Clara gathered her courage. "I've lived in Waverly all my life, and I've seen things that people don't talk about. I've always kept to myself, but what's happening to those poor animals? I can't stay silent any longer." Chris leaned forward. Clara continued, "There's a man named Frank Taylor. He's been involved in shady dealings for years, but no one's been able to prove anything. I've seen him with some of the men you're looking for. They use his property as a meeting place. It's well hidden deep in the woods." Chris's eyes widened. Frank Taylor was a name he'd heard before, often associated with rumors of illegal activities, but nothing had ever been substantiated. The next morning, the team set out. After several hours, they reached the secluded property. It was eerily quiet as they approached the cabin. Chris signaled for silence. Inside, they found evidence of recent activity: food supplies, makeshift bedding, and documents scattered across a table. Mark rifled through the papers. "Chris, look at this. Names, dates, transactions. This is a gold mine." Meanwhile, Amy found a hidden door leading to an underground cellar. Chris and the team descended into the cellar, where they discovered several dogs in makeshift cages. The animals were frightened but otherwise unharmed. The team meticulously combed through the evidence gathered from Frank Taylor's property. As they pieced together the documents and records, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Sheriff Chris Davis, Deputy Amy Brooks, and Deputy Mark Sanchez gathered in the station's conference room. "Look at this," Mark said, spreading out a series of maps and financial records on the table. "These aren't just local transactions. These are payments and shipments going to multiple states." Amy leaned in, her eyes scanning the documents. "This is much bigger than we thought." Chris's jaw tightened as he examined the evidence. "We're dealing with a network that spans across state lines. They're using coded language and encrypted messages, but it's clear they've been running a sophisticated operation for years." Scotland Hasley from ARC joined them. He looked at everything and shook his head. This wasn't just a local dogfighting ring. It was an organized crime syndicate. They were breeding and training dogs, then transporting them to fight in underground arenas across the country. "We need to bring in federal authorities," Chris said decisively. "This is beyond our jurisdiction. We need the resources and expertise of the FBI and other agencies to take these guys down." The following day, representatives from the FBI and other federal agencies arrived in Waverly. Chris briefed them on the situation and provided a detailed overview of the network and their operations. "This is a significant case," one of the federal agents said. "We've been tracking similar operations, but this might be the breakthrough we need to dismantle the entire network." The stakes had escalated dramatically. Later, as Sheriff Chris Davis reviewed surveillance footage from the raid on Frank Taylor's property, something caught his eye. A figure moved stealthily in the background, away from the main group. The person seemed familiar, but Chris couldn't place them immediately. "Look at this," he said to Mark. "Do you recognize that person?" Chris rewound the footage and paused it at the frame showing the mysterious figure. Mark squinted, then his face paled. That's Deputy Wilson." Chris's heart sank. Deputy Tom Wilson had been part of the Waverly police force for years. He was well-liked and had always seemed dedicated to his job. The possibility that he could be involved in the very operation they were trying to dismantle was unthinkable. "I'm certain," Mark said, "but why would he?" For several days, the team quietly tracked Wilson's movements, discovering he had been leaking information to the criminals, helping them evade the investigation. The betrayal explained why the network had been so hard to catch. Chris called Wilson into his office, confronting him with the evidence. Wilson admitted the syndicate had threatened his family, leaving him no choice. Though angry, Chris stayed calm, telling Wilson he should have sought help. As Wilson was taken into custody, Chris felt a deep sadness. Later, while reviewing the files, Chris was shocked to find his estranged brother Michael linked to the dogfighting ring. The next day, Chris and Amy followed the lead. They traced the financial transactions to a remote warehouse on the outskirts of a nearby town. As they approached the warehouse, Chris's heart pounded. The place was heavily guarded, confirming their suspicions that it was a significant hub for the operation. Inside, they found more than they had anticipated. The warehouse was filled with crates of documents, equipment, and more dogs in deplorable conditions. Among the chaos, they spotted Michael. He was overseeing the operations with cold efficiency. Michael turned, shocked at first, then calm and calculating. "Chris, I didn't expect you here." Chris's emotions surged as Michael admitted, "This isn't simple, Chris. There's a lot of money in this. I never wanted it to go this far." Before he could say more, federal agents arrested Michael. Evidence tied him and high-profile individuals to the dogfighting ring. In the following weeks, Waverly began to heal, with the community rallying to support the rescued animals. Chris, watching the dogs recover, felt pride despite the betrayal. Clara Jenkins, who provided the crucial lead, visited the shelter, and Chris thanked her for her bravery in helping save the animals.